This month, we're on a journey of talking about dumb ideas. And in our cynical world, we call every new idea or every iteration on an old idea dumb, don't we? And yet the fact of the matter is that world-changing ideas tend to sprout out of so-called dumb ideas or ideas that we discard as rubbish. Now, it's no secret, I love tech. I'm fascinated by the trends of tech. And one of the things that tech experts and commentators in general failed to see coming was how much what we call social networking would come to dominate just about every aspect of tech and the internet. If you look at the early articles about social networking platforms, you'll see that everybody was super dismissive of Facebook and Twitter and platforms like that when they came on the scene. And they were dumb ideas, weren't they? I mean, people writing in 140 characters about what they had for lunch or their coffee, that's dumb. That'll never be a thing, will it? Now we just take it for granted that Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram are part of life. Now, some of us may still think that they are dumb and that we should shut them down. Yes. But that genie is out of the bottle. No matter how dumb you may have thought it was when it first came out, no matter how dumb you may still think it is, online so-called social networking is here to stay. And in a few short years, it has been woven into just about every aspect of our society. More to that, new industries have been built on top of these simple ideas. As we've seen in the past 3 weeks, dumb ideas get floated in different kinds of ways. The first dumb idea that we looked at was floated as a joke. Jesus had made a request of his disciples that they thought was impossible. And so Andrew, trying to be funny, suggested that they use a little boy's lunch to solve the problem. And Jesus, showing that he has a sense of humor, ran with the idea and blew their minds with it. The second dumb idea that we looked at was floated in a place of childlikeness and bravado. David walks onto a battlefield to face the most terrifying opponent that anybody had ever seen, and all he was carrying was a staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones. It's the dumbest thing that the king and his armies had ever seen, and more to that, he did it without any guarantees of victory. All he had was his belief in God, that God was on his side, and that he'd do the impossible. Now, we all know how the story ends. God uses the improbable to do the impossible. Now, if you look at the stories in the Bible, years later, after David, we encounter a prophet called Elisha. Elisha was full of dumb ideas. Once people were cutting down trees, and the axe head of one of the workers flew into the river, and it obviously sunk to the bottom. And do you know what Elisha's great idea for finding the axe head was? Chop a piece of wood and throw it to the place where the axe head sank. I mean, seriously, Elisha, what's up with you? I first encountered the story of Elisha when I was a teenager. And I grew up in a pastor's home. My attitude towards the Bible was very negative because I felt like it was always being forced on me. But over the years, just by chance, I started to read the books of Samuel and Chronicles and Kings. And they hooked me. There's everything in those books. There's love, betrayal, death, sex, treason, wars, and on and on. And people who say that the Bible is boring have not read some of the stuff in it. And as Christians, we like to whitewash the Bible and pretend that it's all sunshine and rainbows. But there is a very real and sometimes very bloody story of a group of people that was captured by many authors over hundreds and hundreds of years. It's really quite compelling reading. And if you've never read through Samuel and Kings and Chronicles, you should. You owe it to yourself to read those stories. They're quite compelling. If for nothing else, then they just make really fascinating reading. But I digress. I encountered the story of Elisha when I was a teenager. And what you find as you read the story of Elisha is that he was a prophet in Israel at a very tumultuous time. The kingdom of Israel had been split in two decades earlier by two greedy grandsons of David. And the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, were not getting along. More to that, there were other kingdoms around that were starting to exert their dominance over Israel that had come in and conquered their territory by sheer force and brutality. And to the north, in a region that is now in present-day Syria and Lebanon, was a kingdom called Aram. And Aram started to expand southwards, and they would occasionally raid communities of Israel and carry off slaves. One of the most successful commanders in the kingdom of Aram was a man named Naaman. And at the time that we meet Naaman in the Bible, he was a highly esteemed and important man in the kingdom, but he had a grievous skin disease and he was desperate for a cure. Let's read the story together. Do you have one of those handouts? Let's read it together. 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman was general of the army under the king of Aram. He was important to his master, who held him in the highest esteem because it was by him that God had given victory to Aram. A truly great man, but afflicted with a grievous skin disease. It so happened that Aram, on one of its raiding expeditions against Israel, captured a young girl who became a maid to Naaman's wife. And one day she said to her mistress, "Oh, if only my master could meet the prophet of Samaria, he would be healed of his skin disease." Naaman went straight to his master and reported what the girl from Israel had said. "Well then, go," said the king of Aram, "and I'll send a letter of introduction to the king of Israel." So he went off, taking with him about 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothes. Naaman delivered the letter to the king of Israel, and the letter read, "When you get this letter, you'll know that I personally sent my servant Naaman to you. Heal him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he was terribly upset, ripping his robe to pieces. He said, "Am I a god with the power to bring death or life that I get orders to heal this man from his disease? What's going on here? That king is trying to pick a fight, that's what." Elisha, the man of God, heard what had happened, that the king of Israel was so distressed that it ripped his robe to shreds. He sent word to the king, "Why are you so upset ripping your robe like this? Send him to me so he'll learn that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman, with his horses and chariots, arrived in style and stopped at Elisha's door. Elisha sent out a servant to meet him with this message: "Go to the river Jordan and immerse yourself 7 times. Your skin will be healed and you'll be as good as new." Naaman lost his temper. He turned on his heel saying, "I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the diseased spot and get rid of the disease. The Damascus rivers, Abana and Pharpar, are cleaner by far than any of the rivers in Israel. Why not bathe in them? At least I'd get clean." He stomped off mad as a hornet. Let's pause for a moment right here. Naaman's reaction is perfectly justified, isn't it? Nobody cures an incurable disease by bathing in a river. If that were the case, Naaman would have been healed a long time ago. Chances are he'd even waded through the Jordan River a couple of times before this on his raiding expeditions. He clearly knew where the Jordan was. He clearly knew what the condition of the river was. And here's the thing. It would be so easy to hammer Naaman for his pride in this moment. He must clearly think more of himself, yada, yada, yada. But I think that even if Naaman were just an ordinary man with nothing to his name, his reaction would be the same. And the reason for this is that we're not stupid. Water has no real medicinal properties in and of itself, does it? Sure, we use it to quench thirst and wash clothes, and we cook with it, and we use it in ritual purification. But no one is stupid enough to think that water can actually clear or cure a skin condition just by immersing yourself 7 times. If they would have found it out by now. That's a dumb idea. Come on now. And yet, verse 13, His servants caught up with him and said, "Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something hard and heroic, wouldn't you have done it? So why not this simple wash and be clean?" So he did it. He went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times, following the orders of the holy man. His skin was healed. It was like the skin of a little baby. He was as good as new. Then he went back to the holy man. He and his entourage stood before him and said, "I now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God anywhere on earth other than the God of Israel. In gratitude, let me give you a gift." "As God lives," Elisha replied, "the God whom I serve, I'll take nothing from you." Naaman tried his best to get him to take something, but he wouldn't do it. Let's be real for a moment. It's so easy to see the end of the story coming, isn't it? I mean, the theme is dumb ideas. You guys are smart enough to have figured this out by now. Paulo is going to talk about an idea that seemed dumb at the outset, and then he's going to do a big reveal about how the dumb idea was used to do something out of this world. Yawn. When do I get to go home? But if you knew this from the beginning, why then do we live in a society of skepticism? Ask yourself that question. Why are we a people that are risk averse? Why do we make fun of people with dumb ideas when we've been proven wrong over and over again? We know that the next $1 million idea is currently being called dumb, but we're not changing our behavior. On a more personal note, where the church is concerned, people think religion is a dumb idea. I don't think it is. I think it is a life-changing, community-changing, city-changing idea. Why don't we take a risk to invite people to our faith communities even when we know they think religion is dumb? If we're honest with ourselves, we have more in common with Naaman than we have with Elisha and his dumb ideas. You see, Naaman's servants diagnosed the problem so well. This is what they said. "If he had asked you to do something huge and heroic, wouldn't you have done it?" In other words, if his idea hadn't looked so dumb, wouldn't you have done it? That's the real issue for most of us. We want to show and a spectacle. We want the world to be changed through flash and dazzle. We want our miracle to come riding on the back of some glamorous idea. The vehicle for change cannot be a dumb idea. My miracle cannot happen through a dumb idea. What's more, there's something subtle that is revealed in Nehemiah's attitude towards Israel and Israelites. You see, he took them as slaves. His interaction with them was through reaving and raiding. They were a subhuman people to be dominated and owned. So it was already enough of an insult that he had to go to one of their prophets for a miracle that he couldn't find among his own people. But the fact that the prophet wouldn't even come out and talk to him, did you see that? The prophet sent his servant. It was an insult one step too far. He despised the Israelites. He despised everything in Israel. Everything about Israel was dirty and filthy. Here's the thing. God can use the thing that you despise to change your circumstance. God can use the thing that you think is filthy to flip the script in your life. Naaman's healing did not come to him through the vehicles he would have preferred. It came through a slave in his house. It came through a prophet among people he despised. It came through a river that he thought was filthy and dirty. God can use an improbable suggestion to change the story of your life. The ideas that you thought of as dumb, the people that you avoided because you thought that they were not like you, the situations you avoided because they were not up to your arbitrary standards, whatever it is you have been despising can be the vehicle for the change that you want so desperately in your life. This series is important to me for one reason. You see, when people ask me about Pivot 613, I mention 3 words: grace, mercy, and love. And the next expression that I see flash across their faces is one of confusion. That's dumb. Aren't all congregations supposed to be about these three things? Aren't all churches supposed to be about these three things? I thought you would have some new, groundbreaking, distinctive for me to chew on. Come on, Paulo, you can do better than that. Some people actually come out and say it out loud. And when they say it, I let it hang in the air because I'm starting to understand something fundamental. I'm starting to understand even more that the sophistication of your idea, or the severe lack of sophistication of your idea, is not the thing that God needs. I don't think that what God needs from each of us is a sophisticated idea. Instead, I think that what God needs from each of us is just enough faith to be willing to try anything. You do not need a lot of faith to go down to a dirty river to immerse yourself 7 times, do you? It's not the act of washing that heals Naaman, is it? The dumb idea in and of itself is not the thing that God is responding to. God is responding to the kind of faith that will try anything. And most of the time, the only way that we get to that place to be willing to try anything is when we're absolutely desperate. You see, what is behind every dumb idea, every impossible story, is the desperation behind it. As we saw 2 weeks ago, Andrew's idea was born in a place of desperation. David's dumb idea was birthed out of the desperation of seeing the desperation of the troops of Israel. Naaman's miracle that we've looked at today was found in a place of desperation. Now, I think that if we're desperate enough, that we're finally in the place where we're willing to try anything. It is in that space of resignation and near defeat that God works out the impossible in our lives. My friends, I don't know what you're facing in your lives. Some of you are facing situations with insurmountable odds. Some of you are facing challenges that would just blow our minds. Some of you have obstacles in your way and no real way of getting over them. At our congregation, do not be under any illusions. There is no doubt that there is work to be done by each of us if we want to see our lives and the lives of people that we know transformed by grace and mercy and love. And I think that God's call on us this afternoon is to be willing to try anything. So this afternoon, bring your well-thought-out ideas. Bring your half-baked ideas. Bring your dumb ideas. It doesn't matter what state they're in. God doesn't need your idea. He just needs you to be willing to try anything. The act of bringing a dumb idea is more about an act of faith than it is about the content of the idea. God does not respond to the content of your ideas, but rather the kind of faith that would allow you to bring an idea that everybody else says is terrible, lay it before him, and watch him take it and use it in ways that you could have never imagined. So this week, let's end where we ended last week. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Take a good look, friends, at who you were when you got called into this life. I don't see many of the brightest and the best among you. Not many influential, not many from high society families. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses? Chose those nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of the somebodies. It makes it quite clear that none of you can get by blowing your own horn before God. And everything that we have, right thinking and right living, a clean slate and a fresh start, comes from God by way of Jesus Christ. That's why we have the saying, if you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God.